In the latter half of John chapter 10, John shifts gears from discussing what Jesus is doing to now discussing who Jesus is. There's only one sign left in John's gospel that we will read, and that's in chapter 11 with the resurrection of Lazarus. And that is specifically located in chapter 11 to prepare us for the resurrection of Jesus, which will take place in chapter 20. Of course, we'll discuss that next time and in due time together. But at this point, John is shifting gears specifically to who Jesus is. It's not so much what Jesus is doing, now it is who Jesus is. And I think that's an important point. We think about the gospel message, we think about the gospels as they are written for us and recorded for us, and the message of Jesus is presented to us by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but particularly John in this case. We recognize that the emphasis is not so much on what he is doing, but rather on who he is. We can get ourselves into a trap of believing and thinking that the gospel messages or gospel stories are all about what Jesus has done, not so much into who he is. And that happens to our own lives. Think about not just your life with a follower, as a follower of Jesus, if you are one, but in the life, in your life as a person who interacts with other people. We can spend so much time on what we're doing. We can spend so much time on what everybody else is doing. We can report events that's taking place in the world. It's all about actions and doing things, and not so much about identity. Who we are dealing with. Who are these people we're talking to? And that's true in your own spiritual life, I would imagine, or at least it is in mine, where I think about Jesus is doing this, this, and this in other people's life, and he's doing this, this, and this in my life, and why is he not doing in my life what he's doing in other people's lives, etc. And I fail to realize that the whole point for which Jesus is doing anything is to reveal to us who he is. He is the eternal Son of God, the Lord of glory. And John makes sure we understand that from the very beginning of his gospel, in the prologue, and then of course in chapter 1 when John the Baptist points out to his disciples that Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. The end of chapter 3 where John the Baptist says, I must decrease so that the Son of God must increase. And then of course throughout where Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, I am the light of the world, I am the bread of life. He is reminding us of who Jesus is. But here in the middle of chapter 10 is a decided turn, where now Jesus is not only the good shepherd, but now he and the Father are one. And that's what we read here in these verses. You may be familiar with them, or you will be after you read them. But in verse 22, he says this of chapter 10. At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter. John loves to give us those little notes of information to help us understand this is a legitimately real book. And Jesus was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him, and he said to them, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly. Now, Jesus has told them multiple times that he is the Christ. He says, before Abraham was, I was. Or before Abraham was, I am. And then he says, I and the Father are one. He's already said, I'm the light of the world, etc. But again, they are hard of hearing and slow to listen. And so Jesus says, I've done all these works. They bear witness about me, but you don't believe them because you're not among my sheep. They have chosen not to believe in the Lord because they're not of his sheep. That's a distinction that we find in John's gospel between belief and unbelief. Those who would believe and follow after him, and we read that at the conclusion of chapter 10. This is what we read in verse 40. He went away from Jerusalem across the Jordan to the place where John the Baptist had been baptizing. And there he remained, and many came to him and said to him, John did no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true, and many believed in him there. Jesus leaves Jerusalem, crosses the river, and people come to him, and the number of disciples grows. So John here in this section is clear that Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus says in verse 29, my Father who has given the sheep to me is greater than all, and no one is able to snatch any of my Father's sheep out of my hand. I and the Father are one. And so Jesus is clear here. He is the Son of God. He is the revelation of God on this earth. He is God become flesh. John wants us to understand that. This is a very important point because it is in this truth that we find the reality of who Jesus is and the call on our lives to believe in him.